Hello everyone, my name is Christina. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a lovely guest. His name is Thad, and I met Thad in Chinese medical school, and he was just one of those people that I felt was on a similar frequency as me. I was really drawn to him because of his energy, even before I knew his background. And what's interesting is that Thad is a body worker, a martial artist. He is a father as well. But what I found out about Thad was really interesting is that he practices a style of Tuina, Zhengu Tuina, which is what I was studying in my massage therapy education. So that's kind of like a little bit of overlap that I felt when I met him. And yeah, I really wanted to share his story because he's someone who is just an everyday person, a regular person, someone from my life who I've seen grow through these years. And yeah, I want to share his story with you guys. So Thad, let me introduce a little bit more of your history to people, because yes, you can read about this on your website, your bio, etc. But getting into martial arts and healing arts, what was the driving force behind that for you, especially because I know you started in your teenage years?
Yeah, and definitely it was martial arts was the door that I entered through. So, my martial arts journey took me to the healing practices, and obviously martial arts as a practice has potential to be healing in and of itself as well. I think, but yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I was a teenager. Actually, the way I ended up getting into martial arts was sort of. Almost felt like on accident. I was a sophomore in high school and I was feeling like I wanted to do an activity that was more like group oriented. So I tried out for the high school soccer team and did not make it. Totally got cut. And I was like, oh, well, I wanted to do martial arts too. And so I straight up looked through the yellow pages. I saw a thing that was like, said Shaolin Kung Fu. I'd heard about Shaolin Kung Fu, so I decided to give it a try, and then pretty quickly found that, oh, I really loved martial arts. And I definitely growing up, I loved kung fu movies. I'd run around
Same.
ninja. Yeah, of course, I think it's hard to escape that influence. um but that was really, it was kind of random, and
But
by the
why kung fu though? Why kung fu?
it's a
Because
good question.
that's, there's so many different styles. I mean, I went for Aikido and kickboxing, and you went for kung fu. Like, wow, man, straight in, right?
Right. Well, and admittedly, that was also partially biased because I'm half Chinese. So I'm half Chinese, but I was born and raised in the United States. So I mean, my dad's whole family, the Chinese side, is in the United States, but he's actually first generation born in the United States as well. So we're a little removed from the culture. We didn't grow up speaking the language. We'd celebrate Chinese New Year and eat Chinese food, and you use a few terms, but that was it. So to me, also, it seemed like an opportunity to reconnect to Chinese culture, which it very much was, and absolutely has been, and has ended up taking me back to China, or to China, to visit back.
Back to the roots, you could say, Yeah.
But many times. And so yeah, so that was really the kind of the bias. I was sort of open. Actually, the first art that I ever studied right after that was, or right before that, before I'd even started out for the soccer team, was Jeet Kune Do, was Bruce Lee's martial art, actually. Which I did, which is really informalized. So I think that there's a lot of range as to what that means. But I studied for about 8 months, and that was satisfying. And then I tried out for the soccer team, and then I went back to Shaolin Kung Fu, and that's where I stayed. So the school I for a long time, the school I started training at, was much more organized. It had like a belt system and forms that you learn at different levels. And I think that structure for me as a 15-year-old kid was really nice. And they also had a strong program of having more advanced students assist. So by the time I was a brown belt, I was starting to assist in classes, and found that it was kind of double whammy. Like, I love the martial arts for the martial arts. As a practice, I love the physicality of it. I liked the practicality behind the movements, right? That they had this meaning beyond just being movement by itself. The applications fascinated me, all that. But I also discovered I really loved to teach. So as a teenager, I started teaching in classes, and I think that's what really ended up sucking me in most, because I'd go take my class and then I'd want to stay to help out. And it just meant that I ended up doing a lot of, so for all my teenage years, for the, through the rest of high school, pretty much, I was probably at the Kung Fu school, 15 to 20 hours a week, I guess. And my grades went up because my parents you can keep training if you get good grades. And so every day after school, it was do my homework till I go to Kung Fu, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't mind, it wasn't torture because I got to do this thing that I really liked. My younger brother eventually got involved a year after I started. He started, and so we had that to do together. And then I ended up actually taking a year off between high school and college to really just focus on Kung Fu. So I was getting ready for my test to second degree black belt at that time. And so I really wanted to dive in and focus. So I took a year of a year-long break. I deferred my entrance to college. I just worked at a grocery store and did Kung Fu all day. And that was great, and then, yeah. And then, I got to college and I kind of put it aside a little bit, I would train on my own, but I wasn't really doing much. But I couldn't do it for long. Eventually, I started up a not-for-credit club teaching Kung Fu, and I did that for a couple years. But then late in my college career, I switched majors. So I was studying Asian studies, no surprise.
Yeah. See the pattern there.
I know, it's predictable. And that also Chinese language. Well, that was the other thing I did on my year off, is that's when I also started studying Chinese language. So I took a college course at University of Colorado for beginning level Chinese, which in retrospect, I think was great. Because as you know, studying Chinese, the workload is intense. It's not.
Oh yeah. I focus mostly on Chinese, and all my other studies were oh yeah, I have other homework. Sure. Right? Let me just write,
Exactly. No, it's intense. So in retrospect, I'm so thankful. My first year of Chinese, I was only studying Chinese and, doing Kung Fu and working, but I wasn't, I was still living at home with my parents. I wasn't paying rent. So I was saving money, spending some of it on martial arts, studying Chinese. That was all, So
I love that. That's amazing.
It's ideal. I wish I could do it again.
I know, right?
But so I was studying Chinese in school too, and that took me into Asian studies. But about halfway through, I just wasn't feeling it, I think part of it was just the department, I was studying classical Chinese literature, and my advisor was just this terribly dry British man who's no enthusiasm whatsoever. And I directed my whole education. I was do you think I should do this and this and this? And he'd be well, sure. And I'm oh, I didn't think I was craving a little more guidance,
Structure is good for you, from what I can tell. It seems like you really need structure to thrive.
Yes, I think no, it's true. I think structure tends to be good. I also really buy into this idea that we have in Chinese medicine of phased development of the self. So we say every 7 years, right? For females, they have a new system, a new body. Same thing's true for males. Every 8 years, we turn over, right, and are in a new cycle. And I think that's physical, mental, spiritual, the whole package of being a human. That's a good way to look at it. So I think in those phases, I did really thrive in the structure. But it's interesting to me that later I ended up in internal arts, which is much fuzzier, no belts, no, yes. Just do the same basic thing most of the time over and over. It's not as much about this outward collecting all these different forms and all these cool, most dynamic looking movement ever, and much more about cultivating this inside thing that from the outside looks like you're just doing the same thing every day. So it's interesting. But you're absolutely right about, like, I think for a long time, and still, yes, a little structure is definitely good for me.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
how did that shift for you then? Obviously from a physical practice and then getting introduced to internal practices, which for me, even though I was exposed to yoga and pranayama and meditation, it never felt the same as it did when I found qigong.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like, whoa, it totally like opened up my inner world in a different way. So how was that shift for you in your personal life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, and parallel to you, I think I have a lot of, like, I had a pretty profound experience once I got into internal arts as well. The real internal arts, I would argue. So in my original Shaolin lineage, we trained. I'll say this: we trained internal arts forms. So we did
Mm,
like Tai Chi forms and Xingyi forms and Bagua forms, and so we did the movements, but in retrospect, having trained, I think, more deeply in internal arts in a different lineage, I recognize that we were, in the end, kind of doing those forms, but still with a Shaolin mechanic. So it's
mm,
still based off of the body mechanics and the principles of Shaolin. It's just the form took the shape of something that looked like Tai Chi, or Bagua or whatever. So I thought I'd had exposure to it prior, and also, so once I moved to New York, so I'm in college, I changed majors, I ended up studying dance actually. And that's what brought me to New York. So I come to New York, I'm dancing professionally as a modern dancer, and I'm really,
wow.
yeah, I mean, and it's not nearly as glamorous as it sounds.
Okay, okay. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
but it's what got me here. And so I've always had this love of movement, and like the studying the kinesiology, and also the way that people structure their dance classes affects the way I think about organizing my curriculum. So dance has definitely had an influence on me, but I really don't do it at all. I mean, not in that realm, like
Right,
I'll dance in
right,
my living room, but other than that, I'm not really involved with it.
right.
At that level. But so that brought me to New York. I was dancing for a few years, probably 3 or 4 years, and I started to really miss martial arts and especially teaching. I mean, the whole time I was training on my own. So I'd
Mhm.
train, I'd go back home, I'd learn an intensive amount of material with my teachers and then just work on it on my own. And that's fine. But I started to really miss teaching. So in, I think 2005, I started a Shaolin Kung Fu school here in the city under my original lineage, and just renting time out of the dance studio, like 2 days a week, running classes, kind of built on the model that my teachers ran their school on, and grew that over the next 6 years. Um, and so I was really just steady in the external arts path for a long time, especially because I was a teacher, and like I was fully sold. Like that's what I was going to do. I was going to be 80-year-old, still doing Shaolin Kung Fu, and teaching was my goal, And but um, essentially what happened was, towards the end of that, probably 5 years into training, I'd say, maybe 4.5, uh, myself and some of the other instructors. So they're from our original school, they're kind of branched out schools all across the country, right? And most of them were run by instructors that had trained in that original Colorado school, but some had trained in some of the other branch schools. But it all rooted back to those schools in Colorado directly. And we started to hear that there was some not so good things happening in the old school. So I think every hierarchical system kind of has potential to suffer these problems, right?
Mm.
Put a couple humans at the top of a system where their word is law and everyone looks up to them no matter what. I really feel like that's problematic for most people.
I agree. I agree. I want to parallel it to yoga as well, like the guru figures. And we've seen what's been going on
Mm-hmm.
in the last 5, 6 years with actually the guru figures, dropping like flies because of all the things that have happened internally and the abuse of that power relationship over the students. So I completely agree with you. While we can look up to the teachers and admire all of the years of knowledge and wisdom, ultimately, like, let's not idolize people, right? So
Totally.
yeah,
And just
always
to,
question your teachers too,
oh, absolutely.
they're human.
Exactly. And if they claim to not be human, that's a problem.
Right, like,
In my
okay,
experience.
different talk, different realm.
And just to kind of fast forward, is it okay if I go a little non-linear?
Absolutely, yes, of course.
Just to fast forward a little bit, that was one of the things that really drew me to training with Tom, my current teacher, Tom Bisio, because he's such an honest human about things. Like he'll talk about his flaws. He'll talk about the difficulties he has in training, or like being a knucklehead. He's like, oh, it took me so long to figure this out, or like, oh, I just didn't really want to train that day. But like he absolutely clearly has no desire to be that guru figure. And actually it makes me much more comfortable, especially with having been under a system where that was abused, to be like, okay, I trust you. Like I'll invest myself in this system because I can see that you're actually humble and honest enough to recognize your own humanity. And I think that, I just think that's an absolutely critical factor, whether even if you're not teaching, as a practitioner, if you think you're doing everything perfectly, you're never going to get better.
Yeah, amen. You think you know it all? Well, then no room for growth there. Thank you.
Yeah, the cup is full, right? So anyway, so that was a marked difference. So at that time, about 4.5 years into running the school, we hear about exactly like what you've been hearing about in the community. So my original teachers were a husband and wife duo, and the husband was, accused of, inappropriate sexual conduct with some of the students, and the wife ended up sort of protecting him and trying to character assassinate the victims, and it went to court. It did this whole thing, and we're myself and the other instructors are all out at the distance. We're not sure what's going on because we're not there, but we talked to some of the people that had brought forward the accusations, and it's similar to what we see today. Like if there's the people that bring forward those accusations don't have much to gain from it. Especially but maybe, like you could make an argument that if someone's really famous, you could gain a certain amount of notoriety and maybe ride that fame to something, but like impossible in this scenario. It's these martial arts, all they're going to suffer is potential ostracization from the group, having to like put something that they're ashamed of out into the public sphere. Like that's a hard thing. And so when multiple people do it, like it's a hard thing to argue against. I mean, nothing's absolute, but like it's pretty damning at that point. And I also had trained with a lot of the women that brought forward the accusations, so I knew them to be good people. I knew they weren't that they loved training when I was there, and that the last thing they'd want to do is something that would harm the community of the school. So I trusted them right away, and so did a bunch of the other instructors. So we all gathered together, basically, and just formally separated from the schools, went our own ways, and became much more independent entities. And at that time I didn't realize it, but that was sort of like the nail in the coffin in my external training. Maintaining a vibrant Chinese martial arts practice is a constant thing. It is a practice. It is never finished. You're constantly working on it, and that level of maintenance and dedication is not possible if your heart's not in it. And at that point, I had felt really betrayed by my teachers, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. I didn't love the art, and I didn't want to pass it down really. But I had momentum. I loved my community at my school. I loved teaching. I had been training other people to assist in classes, and I loved the group I'd built, but I didn't love the system anymore. I lost the fire. So I slowly faded out to where basically like a year and a half after we left, I just ended up closing the school altogether.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Big. And that, you spoke of trauma, like for me, relative in my life, that was a big trauma. Those teachers were basically like almost parents to me, and really formative. And, my experience of still their influence on my life has been in many ways quite positive, because they brought me to Chinese martial arts. But to have them act that way, and then also to deny it and blame the victims and all that stuff, it just kind of shattered this core belief that my whole definition of who I was built on,
Yeah.
So I eventually shut down the school, but in that process, as I mentioned, I was training other assistants under me to help teach. And so I designed this whole teachers training program. We had this whole curriculum of books. And one of them was Tooth from a Tiger's Mouth by Tom Bisio, my current teacher.
Yeah.
And we were reading it and we saw that he taught Bagua in New York. So we just reached out and we're like, hey, can we come visit? And one morning, he was teaching early morning classes at that time. One morning, we just showed up, a bunch of us. And Tom was great. He was really friendly. I was really intrigued by what he was doing in class. And he was just very welcoming from the get-go, no weird competitive energy. He wasn't trying to like prove he was the bigger dog. Turns out he didn't have to. Once, because as soon as I started training with him and he did applications with me, I was like, whoa, I have never felt something like this. And not just because he was stronger and more powerful than me, although he was stronger and more powerful than me, but that wasn't what he was using. Like I had finally, with Tom, experienced the thing that I'd read about in books about internal arts, where I couldn't feel him.
What is it? What is it? What is it that you read about? What tell me, what is that intangible thing that I love talking about? And obviously you're in it too.
Yeah, well, it is the actual physicalized manifestation of that Taoist principle of softness overcoming hardness, right? That's one way to think about it. There's obviously many ways to think about it. Sometimes in the Tai Chi classes, they talk about it as a needle wrapped in cotton. So that inside there's this there's this steel pointed focused power, but it's wrapped in the cotton so that it feels soft on the outside, It's moving with an integrated, enlivened, but relaxed body. So that when you're relaxed, you're more sensitive to what your opponent is, the energies that they're giving you, and you can blend with it. And so that when you enter their space, you do so with that softness and that relaxedness. So you know exactly where they are when you're entering, if you have a higher skill level, and they can't feel you at all. So a lot of times in the classic books, they talk about it like someone feels like a ghost, or like they're described as like, it feels like they're not there until they're there, and then they feel like a tidal wave. And that was, that's exactly what I felt with Tom, where like we'd cross arms and he'd do something on me, and it was just like, I'm not, like I didn't have time to process it, and I'm getting tossed, and for me, that was super engaging. I was like, oh man, do it again. Like I want to feel that again, and so I do have a soft spot for but because it was just like a cognitive dissonance thing. It's like, I don't get it. Like, I definitely worked with plenty of people who are just strong and powerful, and they overpower you, but it's just like smash. You're like, okay, like it's clear what happened.
Brute force versus this finer, right? Almost like I said, intangible, energetic quality, right?
Yes, although I hesitate on the word intangible because
it is tangible, but not for everyone, I must say.
True, but it is potentially tangible for anyone who practices.
Absolutely.
Because once you feel it in your body consistently enough, then you can start doing it with another person. But the ability to apply internal principles in a martial realm, in my mind, is sort of like the most demanding area. You'll feel the principles at work in your body in like a standing practice, or just like a Qigong for health practice very early on. Within a couple months, definitely within the first year of practice. Probably sooner, it depends on each person, but you'll start to feel stuff. You'll be sensitive to things you weren't sensitive to before. You'll feel movements even when you're still on the outside. You'll start to feel more clearly. I think it's on all levels. You'll feel more clearly your emotional reactions to things. You'll see your thought patterns more clearly. Like it's getting to tune in with yourself more and more as a natural result of the practice, and that's amazing. But once and you can do all of that within the kind of the shelter of your own body, and it's absolutely valuable. But it's a different thing then to take that and have that quality maintain its integrity against outside force. And
Absolutely.
sometimes that outside force could be an argument with your boss, or a disagreement with your partner, or a cab coming at you in the street, or slipping and falling off the pavement, or a violent altercation where someone wants to hurt you, and it can range in this full range. So in my mind, like, I tend to define martial as anytime you take that internal integrated state and use it to interact with the world. So opening a door counts as martial arts to me, shaking someone's hand counts as martial arts to me. Like, anytime you're relating with and affecting your environment with your integrated structure, that counts as martial arts. And then sometimes, but not very often, thankfully, in modern society, it takes the form of, like a fight. But that's very rare, actually, So we're obviously not training to fight, because that's very few.
What are the chances, unless you're seeking it, right? Which I know some people in my life who do.
It's true.
So yeah,
those people tend not to stick around with internal martial arts that long.
Exactly.
And it's funny because it is, there's internal martial arts is this, like, filled with paradox everywhere, right? So, like, we just talked about hardness and softness. Like, it's totally relaxed and overwhelmingly powerful. It's totally soft and, like, insanely fierce, like, at the same time. It doesn't alternate. It's not like we go soft hard. It's that we're in this state where both things are true at the same time. And when both of those aspects are alive, they actually support each other. They don't cancel each other out. And this seems like a really esoteric concept, but it's physicalized, it's actualized. I think maybe an easier analogy that I like to use all the time is just the physical alignments in internal arts, where, let's take a prime example for the way we align the spine, where we want to both sit the tail, where the tail has a heavy quality, like there's a plumb line attached to the tailbone, but the crown is lifted, where it feels like we're suspended by a thread from the top of our head. And those are the two classical analogies they use. But I also don't think it's an accident, one, that they use images that are outside of your body. So especially in internal arts, like, I can lift the crown by, like, driving my head up, but now I've achieved one alignment at the sacrifice of others, So I'm going to be trading one problem for another. If my head's always here and I fix it by, like, driving my head up this way, well, now my upper back's going to be all tight. I'm going to start to probably feel anxiety because I'm tight through the chest and locked in my diaphragm, right? Like, there's all these implications from doing it that way. But if instead, like, from the central place we work from, which we call Mingmen, which is closely associated with Dantian, if we open Mingmen, move from there and let the crown feel lifted, where things don't have to tighten, but the crown can lift, all of a sudden it's something different, right? But the crown can only lift to the degree that the tailbone sits. So it's not only the crown lifting, because if only the crown lifts, we would get uprooted. If only the tail sits, we tend to crush our structure. So there's a sweet spot in between where, to me, it feels like I'm inflated from the inside out. So Mingmen, that deep central thing, opens and inflates. And it causes a chain reaction of inflation through all the tissues of the body, especially the central axes and the spine. And so then it's not that first I sit the tail and then I lift the crown. It's that I sit the tail, lift the crown. And when that thing happens, your senses get more sensitive, you feel things happening in your body. And if you can maintain that state while you're interacting with someone in a martial scenario, it's crazy how different it is. It feels like you're not doing anything and they go flying, you can feel where their foot is just by touching their arm. You don't have to look, It's like, so there's all these repercussions that happen that essentially, though, just boil down to this simple principle of, open Mingmen, align the body, and ride the flow. Like, you're not actually doing a lot. You're like, in my class, I emphasize a lot, like, all of the alignments, like sitting the tail and lifting the crown, it feels like they're being done to you, not that you're doing them. And when you're in that space, all of a sudden things open up. And, like we said before, like, these arts are rooted in Taoism. So in my mind, I've been really churning over this idea that it's actually kind of a brilliant way to experience non-dualism, or Wu Wei that they talk about in Taoism, right? Which also sounds super esoteric. Like what? Like, but where we don't attach to categorizing things in different places. So I don't attach to just lifting the crown. I don't attach to just sitting the tail. I want to live in that alive, present space where, again, both things are working dynamically and supporting each other at the same time. Same thing is true even with the concepts like hardness and softness. Like I want to be firm and structured. I want to be connected and powerful, but I also want to be totally slackened and soft and adaptable, changeable. And those two things, again, support each other, right? Mm-hmm. Even down to like, I want to get better. I want to train regularly as I can with a mindset of improvement, recognizing where I'm not very strong, recognizing the places that need improvement and working on them. So I want to train with that level of humility where I recognize like I've got a lot of work to do and I'm ready to get to work. But at the same time, I need a certain level of confidence that I can do it, that practicing regularly will produce results, that I will make progress, that I'm innately good enough to manifest these principles eventually, So I need that balance between humility and confidence. So, and it's, again, I think it's not a thing of you one or the other. We want to more and more cultivate consistently being in that space where both things are true and supportive. So that's kind of, I think, the principle of internal. Sorry, I went way off tangent there. But
no, not at all. But that's absolutely, and honestly, emphasizing the continuity of practice. Whether that's Bagua, which I do want to ask you a little bit about because we threw the term out there, but I'm not sure that a lot of people are familiar with it.
That's a good point.
We mentioned Qigong as well, which people who have seen my my channel and my videos are familiar with the concepts. But the continuity and just that dedicated practice, it's key, because in my personal experience, you don't feel and see these changes easily or as fast. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I'll start practicing and within, I don't know, a month, I'll see changes. And sometimes those changes are so subtle, like you said, you may be less reactive in your everyday life, right? So I feel like it does penetrate other levels of existence within our everyday life as well. So to kind of like just sidetrack back a little bit, can you tell the audience what is Bagua? What does that actually mean? And I know that that's something you teach. I've taken a few of your classes. The practice itself, in my experience of it, even though I had such a limited experience with it, because I have other practices in my life, I have to admit that just the Bagua walking, the circle walking, or I've felt the shift of energy within the class, right? So it wasn't like in the beginnings of my practice in these internal cultivating practices, it took me a long time to feel anything. I'm like, what am I just doing? Like, I don't understand what's going on. I feel nothing, And then in time, I was like, oh, I feel a buzzing sensation. I feel warmth. I feel, more elated, in a better mood, less reactive. And then it's just like trickled into other areas of life. So that was really great for me to like almost immediately feel it after just 2 sessions, of taking the class. And you are a really, really thorough teacher, like very precise. And I love details. I feel like in order for me to understand or even visualize things, I need details. Otherwise, it's just this like arbitrary thing in my mind,
Yeah.
So yeah, Bagua.
No, that's a great question. And I hadn't heard that you'd had that experience. That's amazing. I will just give you a little credit too, though, that you were probably well set up to do that. That's not necessarily everyone's experience, but the fact that you'd built the foundation via other Qigong training makes sense.
Absolutely.
And any mindfulness-based practice can do that. I mean, I think I'm not a yoga practitioner, but I imagine good yoga could do that. We definitely frequently have people that with a strong meditation background that come into it. You know, it can be helpful, those other practices, absolutely, but it's really good if you have some experience within the Chinese realm of internal arts in general, because the alignments and the principles just tend to be more parallel. So the fact that you'd done Qigong to the point where you started to feel things in Qigong meant that you were primed to be able to apply the things that you developed in Qigong are going to carry over into Bagua, you know? Mm-hmm. So what is Bagua? So Bagua, we call it Bagua, but the full Chinese name is Bagua Zhang. So Bagua Zhang literally means the 8 changes palm. 8 changes palm, Baz, the 8 guas changes, Zhang means palm. And so, you know, just as to define it from that title, the Bagua in Chinese, the 8 changes literally is referring to the 8 trigrams of the I Ching. Mm-hmm. So the I Ching is this classical, arguably the oldest classic text in Chinese, essentially extrapolating out the idea of yin and yang to create a system for understanding all change in
the universe.
Reality. In the universe, exactly. Right? So it's this binary system, yin and yang, right? And the trigrams are those, for those that don't, I know you know, but for those that don't, are the, if you see the yin yang with the 8 symbols around it that are the solid and broken lines, those are the gua. So the solid line represents yang, the broken line represents yin, and the way that they're arranged, is meant to express different qualities of the relationships of yin and yang. So essentially then, Bagua is in theory based off of that. So in a basic way, we can just say Bagua is yin-yang theory manifest as an internal art. And I think that's, you know, that's absolutely true. So, you know, in yin-yang theory is based in Taoism. We'll jump in a little. Sure. On this idea of there's this classical phrase from the Tao Te Ching: from nothingness comes the one, from one is birth two, from two is birth three, from three is birth the 10,000 things, right? So the nothingness is what we call Wu Ji, which is also a standing practice for us. When we stand totally neutral, just arms hanging out the sides, feet parallel under our hips, breathing to Mingman. That for us is an experience of Wu Ji, that quality of nothingness, which is maybe nothing. I don't love nothingness as a translation. It's a little bit, literally what Wu Ji means is lack of extremity or lack of polarity. So the word Wu is the same Wu as Wu Wei in Taoism, which means sort of non-action, but almost is inferred to mean like achievement through non-action. So it doesn't mean non-action through no movement and change. It just means we don't force anything to happen. We ride the flow of changes and things change without us feeling like we do anything. So that's really what Wu Wei is. Wu Ji, similarly, we call it non-polarity. And what that means is it's the state before Tai Chi. So Tai Chi, which is the same word from Tai Chi, from what we think of as Tai Chi in Western culture, Tai Chi Chuan, another internal martial art, means great polarity. And really, though, it's referring to yin and yang. Yin and yang are the great polarities. So like what we think of as the yin yang symbol in Chinese, we call the Tai Chi Tu, the map of yin and yang. So Wu Ji, lack of polarity, represents, in theory, the way, that good analogy I like it for it in Western culture is it's like what was around before the Big Bang. A nothingness that's, however, filled with the potential to become a whole universe. So it's an enlivened nothingness. And then from nothing, you have the one, right? The one, they would argue, classically in Taoism, is essentially the Tao. Sometimes that gets thought of, you know, the Tao or the way, or a thought or an intent or some spark that is the Tao interacts, you know, emerges from the nothingness, and then that immediately breaks into yin and yang. That's the two. So from one birth to two, we go into yin and yang. And then from two comes the three. And in my mind, what this is the three is actually the intermingling of yin and yang. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then they begin dynamically interacting. And through that dynamic interaction, all of the phenomenal universe is created, which is the 10,000 things. Just a poetic way of saying all the stuff is 10,000 things, right?
Love it.
So you have the 1, the 2, the 3, and so the 8 changes, the 8 gua, represent these sort of very primal mixtures of different moments in that 3 stage when yin and yang are interacting. Maybe it's mostly yang above and just a little bit of yin below. Maybe it's mostly yin above and a little bit of yang below. Maybe it's yang in the middle and yin above and below, right? It's all the possible permutations of solid and broken lines that represent where yin and yang are in the balance at that moment. So it's like a photograph of something dynamic, you know, as a way of describing and understanding change. So that's the principle that Bagua is based off of. So Bagua Zhang, 8 changes palm, we would know, basically is reference to this idea that it's a fighting system. The palm indicates that it's a fighting system, which also in and of itself is sort of unique. It's one of the very few martial arts that's not noted as Chuan. So like Shaolin Chuan, Taiji Chuan, Xingyi Chuan, Tongbei Chuan, like they're almost all called Chuan, which was translated as fist. Bagua Zhang is one of the only arts that describes its style with palm. But it's not to say that Bagua only uses palms. It generally trains mostly open hand, but there's absolutely punches and elbows and kicks and all that stuff within the art. So it's not saying that the techniques are limited to palm, but palm is the primary form. But in my mind, I also kind of think that it's a reference to the idea that classically Bagua was a little bit more of like a second stage martial art. So even the original founder, who's credited as the founder, was very well established as a spear master and in Lohan Chuan, external Chinese martial arts, before he supposedly found a Taoist in the woods that taught him Bagua. Can be neither confirmed nor denied, but you know, the classical Chinese martial arts style. But either way, he was the first one to bring it out of note where it's documented, right? And it wasn't that long ago, actually. You know, it was 1800s. So we do have clear documentation that Dong Hai Chuan, the founder of Bagua, existed. But everyone also that trained under him, which sprouted out the different styles of Bagua, also had all were well established. So like Cheng Tinghua was a Shuaijiao guy. Yin Fu, I don't know what Yin Fu's original style was, but he was more striking based. So and so Bagua became essentially like a amplification module that you could plug onto your original training. So because Bagua is based on body principles more than techniques, it will affect everything you do physically. So you know, my teacher had said, and I found this to be absolutely true, when you start training Bagua, you feel terrible at Bagua for a while. Because it is hard. It's very demanding in its exactness. And you're also becoming more sensitive as you train more. So you start to feel the things that are wrong more. And you're like, oh my God, I'm not making any progress. Even though you are making progress, it just doesn't feel that way on the inside. But the place where you see it come out first is in some other area of physical skill. So we've had people that are like scuba divers that are like, dude, my breath is different. I didn't intentionally do anything, but like I'm moving differently. I trained a guy who was an older triathlete for a while, and he said all of a sudden the times on his bike were getting better and better, and he wasn't doing anything different. And his trainer was like, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't know, I'm just like walking slowly. And then, you know, but right, but
it works.
It works because it's principles. And as the principles get incorporated into your body, they start to express themselves in everywhere. And it's easier for them to come out in a place where you're really physically well-trained already, because you're not well-trained in Bagua yet. And then, but so anyway, that was true for the other practitioners as well. Like the Shuaijiao guy, oh, his throws got way better. So his style has more of the look of like throwing art. Yin Fu was more of a striker, so he emphasized piercing a lot, and you know, and he used like a thin, narrow guy, right? So his expression of Bagua looked very different. But so all this is to go back to say, I think, in my mind, I think that it's called Zhang because it's saying it's a level after Chuan. Like assuming you have some base level martial arts of some other style that's a Chuan style, then Bagua Zhang can affect and improve whatever that is as almost a secondary style. So Bagua, that's the theory of where it comes from. It's in the family of internal arts, Neja Tren, which they still call Tren, but and the three main ones are Bagua, Taiji, and Xingyi. Tongbei is also classically in there, Liu Hebafa, but those are not as well known. But the three main ones, mostly Taiji, right? Everybody knows Taiji, right? Most people have heard of it, right? The Xingyi and the Bagua are not as well known. And Bagua, though, you'll immediately recognize it because it's the walking in the circle. That's the one distinctive thing that sets Bagua apart, as and it's also the primary mode of training, right? So it's interesting when you were talking about it, you're like, we were just walking in circles. Like, oh, not just. No, like the circle walking is like, it is the alpha, it is the omega, it's the key.
Yeah.
If you only ever circle walked, you'd be set. If you did all the supplementary exercises but never circle walked, it would be difficult to manifest Bagua.
That's the thing. I feel like, you know, at least in my experience, because I've also been a teacher for like 12 years now, and I feel like people sometimes attach themselves to like, oh, you know, I have to get better. I have to, you know, like this practice. But it's like, yeah, it takes time. You know, let's just feel it. Let's, you know, it's people who take yoga classes and then it's like, oh, I have to look perfect in this pose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about being perfect in the pose, really like being aware of the internal state, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're saying that Bagua is an internal martial art, mm-hmm. and as an internal practice and internal cultivation of these forces within us, and kind of helping us also to be aware of the forces outside of us, which are obviously there. Mm-hmm. Now, can you say that maybe in your personal life, you see the effects of your practice, obviously for 2 decades now, but do you see the effects of your practice in your life, in your personal relationship, and especially now as a father? Mm-hmm. I want to talk about that a little bit, just because I know that people struggle sometimes with parenting and all the stressors of life and having to work and maintain a home. And then on top of all of that, if you have hobbies and things you'd like to do, how do you manage it all? How do you not get stressed out and freaked out? So tell me a little bit about your experience.
It's a great question. Yeah. So I am a new dad. My son Oscar was born mid-pandemic, August 21st. So he just past 6 months. Yeah, I mean, first of all, absolutely. Like even before Oscar was born, without a doubt, I mean, internal arts, it's insidious in a good way, you know, but it seeps into all facets of your life. And it's supposed to, like, that's not an accident. So I think any well-developed internal martial arts method, or internal method even, but definitely internal martial arts method, has, again, this balance of 3 different things that are present. And I've definitely found that to be true in my life. So you have the martial aspect, which I had already talked about, is basically like interacting with the outside world. You have the health and longevity aspect, and that's a lot of like that cultivating the interior, like, so just within the shelter of your own body, can you open up things that are tight? Can you start to, you know, remove some things that are stuck, get things moving and flowing and starting to operate in a more balanced way just within your body, that kind of health and longevity aspect. So that should be there. And then there's also a spiritual aspect, you know, which is a little harder to talk about because it is a little bit more ethereal. But, you know, if your body's aligned and your organs are working in a more balanced way, you're going to have your emotional, psychological life will be better, right? And that, you know, that is also one thing that I really love about the Chinese perspective is your mental experience as a human is not separate from your physical experience, you know? So how we talk about things like excess fear affects the kidneys, right? Excess rumination affects the spleen and stomach. Excess grief affects the lungs. Excess joy affects the heart, right? I love that one because I think sometimes in Western culture, we still want to find the hack that will allow us to only experience what's positive. But in my experience, having even tried to do this, you know, like absolutely, like my life has had its ups and downs without question. And there were times when I wanted to try and avoid the downs, you know, and we can do that with the internet. We can do that with drugs and alcohol. We can do that with relationships. We can do that with work, right? There's a million ways to avoid experiencing what we're experiencing. And it sort of prolongs the inevitable, you know? If we don't deal with it then, it's going to get stored away somewhere in our body. And we're going to have to deal with it eventually. And that's okay. That's not a judgment. We all will do that because we can't deal with everything all the time. Like being a dad is a good example. Like I've had to just, some things just don't get done. It just isn't, there's no energy left in the tank, you know? I'm not practicing as much as I was before he was born. There's nothing I can do. I just reached the end of the day. There's no more hours left, you know? But I think that spiritual aspect is it's key, you know? So in my mind, in these internal practices, your level is defined by, if we think of that as almost like a three-legged stool that's defining your level is defined by the shortest leg. So you might be really good at martial arts, but you train too hard and your body's not very healthy and you're kind of an angry person and you haven't dealt with some issues. And so it's tilted and you're being held back by these other two parts. You might be super into the spiritual part and lots of self-reflection and really know yourself well, but I don't really want to engage with the physical part of the body. It's the body's this gross thing, and you know, like you're limited by that part, right? Maybe it's the health and longevity piece that you don't want to start to embrace a lifestyle, right? Which is basic, like eat real foods that are appropriate to the season, get some sleep, you know. Yes. Don't be on the screen all the time, right? This is basic things, you know, but they're hard. That's not to say that they're easy. I recognize they're hard for me too, you know, but I think that with the internal arts, it becomes harder and harder to stay consistently off course because by nature, they make you more sensitive. So, you know, I just can't handle being my body really doesn't like either being in like a super heightened emotional state, whether I'm really frustrated or angry or whatever, or, you know, sad or depressed or whatever it is, my body doesn't like it. And I feel it intensely. So it's motivating for me to do something about it, you know? I think the other aspect too is that, you know, because internal arts is a continual practice like we were talking about, it means that you're constantly having to look honestly at yourself. You know, so you're constantly having to be like, you know, I've been working on circle walking forever, but this one part of Kobu, every time I Kobu, yeah, that's right. It does this weird thing. I'm floating my foot, or I'm shortening Mingmen, or I'm, you know, it's a pattern. Oh, I see it. That's a pattern. And the fact that that pattern's there doesn't make me a bad practitioner or a bad person, but I'm not going to ignore the pattern and pretend it doesn't exist and think I'm perfect. So I learn over time to adopt this calmer state of like, oh, something's a little off. Let me work on it for a little while. It might not get fixed all the way today, but is it going to make some progress? And can I find value in the process and not the result? Then I'm golden. Then I just do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And 10 years from now, it's gone and I don't even remember it's there. And it may take that long for certain things, especially most of us are adults that are engaging with these practices. We've spent decades messing up our bodies. You know, it's not going to get fixed in a month or a year, but it'll feel better in a month, but it won't be fixed all the way in a month. So celebrate the feeling better, celebrate the process, you know, pat yourself on the back and motivate yourself to do it again. Pat yourself on the back and motivate yourself to do it again. It's just like eating. We never get to eat the one meal that's going to fill us up forever. It doesn't exist. It would kill us if we tried to eat that much food, right? It's about like eat regularly and well. You know, that we never eat a meal that's so good that we don't have to eat a meal again. We never practice and achieve a level that's so high that we never would benefit from practicing again, you know? So I think that like just those qualities and the parenting aspect that you asked about have been huge. So like I can show up and hold my screaming baby and be like, I don't know how to get him to sleep. You know, I'm not sure what's happening. Well, let me try this. Let me try okay, let me try the rocking. Let me try the locking. Let me try shushing, you know, like, and tiny things too. It's funny that you mentioned, well, like I find like I can shush for a really long time because my breath is pretty good. You know, I've been using, you know, since he was born, I've been doing like skin to skin time with where he was strapped to my chest, and I'd take him outside. This is how I got my practice in at the beginning, is for one of his naps, I'd just strap him to me skin to skin, walk circles in the backyard, and I would do the 6 healing sounds with him. So
I love that.
I would just do the sounds, and you know, I believe that they resonate at these frequencies that encourage the different organ systems to, you know, harmonize, and so it can't be bad.
Absolutely.
I mean, it put him to sleep. At the very minimum, it put him to sleep.
Yeah, sound frequency. I just had an interview with a friend of mine who's a sound healer. We talked extensively about the vibration and how it affects the human body, etc. So yeah, it's great that you've been incorporating that and with your kid for sure.
And he likes it, you know.
Of course.
So, I mean, there's those direct uses of those tools. There's also the thing of, you know, and this is true also not only in terms of internal martial arts, but in terms of the medical part that we haven't really touched on, but this idea that me being a practitioner of internal martial arts helps me be a better practitioner of body work as well, because when I can be more sensitive to my inside, I can be more sensitive to my patient's inside. Also, you know, by coincidence, all the alignments that allow me to issue power into an opponent also allow me to issue power into a patient's body, but with the intent to heal rather than, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? It's just the principles are identical. It's just what shape does the intent form it into, right? So there's this idea that what I do in my body affects my patient's body or my opponent's body, right? And I find that very true with Oscar too. Like if he's freaking out and I start to freak out, it rarely goes well. But if he's freaking out and I can just like breathe to Mingman, realign my body, like I relax me on the inside, eventually I think it'll relax him. I mean, you know, he can't really tell me directly, but
well, it's interesting that you're saying that, because I've worked with clients who have children, and in my work with them, like where we use binaural beats and certain frequencies for them in their meditations, they say include your child, especially like clients who have toddlers, like 2-year-olds. And they say, wow, knocked out, like asleep, you know? And I said, try to incorporate these things with your kids more often. I am not a mother yet, but just hearing different people giving me feedback, I'm like, these things do work. Let's just implement them regularly, like eating and internal practices as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's very important. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to ask you, people can find you online. You are teaching classes actively currently, correct?
Yeah, so I'm teaching a beginning Bagua class on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7:30 p.m. and a standing
Eastern Standard Time?
Oh, sorry, yes, Eastern Standard Time. And a standing meditation class on Saturdays from 3 to 3:30 p.m.
Okay.
And on both of the classes, they're on Zoom, and once people are registered for the classes, I send out a recording each week. So even if you can't make the time, for each week, the class is still available. If you really wanted to train, you can always do that. I mean, you can't really ask questions. So we do like there's a period before the class on Tuesdays and after the class on Saturdays, where I'll answer questions directly from people and whatnot. Yeah. But you can still get a lot out of it, you know. I think I've had people that have trained mostly on the videos and still made good progress. So yeah, so they can find me online, and all of that, you know, the classes, the registration for the classes is all on my website.
And what's your website?
It's martialwellness.net.
Okay, cool. I'll put it in the description box so people can find it with ease. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience. It's always awesome talking about these topics. I'm super passionate about internal work in general, but because of my limited background in martial arts, I really like to explore the topics of how do these martial arts practices really like penetrate other areas of our life, because I know that they do. So it's been great reconnecting with you and chatting with you today. I thank you again for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.